Out there, Dan here from Geekcast Radio, doing another must-read comic book video. This is where I go through some of the best comics and explain to you why you must read them. Today, I will be discussing Hostage. This is a comic that I think should not work for a lot of different reasons, but first and foremost, because it tells a story that's very static, as the cover would indicate. It's legitimately, the bulk of the story is a man in a room handcuffed to a grate, and how could that really work in the realm of comics? It's a very visual medium. That will become tedious and boring, even if you're dealing with a true life story. And the answer to that question is this is a remarkable comic. That's why I'm doing it. Spoiler alert. But this is actually based upon true events. This event occurred in 1997. Focuses on the person of Christophe André. He was working for a humanitarian group that was eventually kidnapped, named Caucasus. And they give you a nice little map for us stupid Americans who don't know where all these different countries are. They give you some idea of kind of the political landscape of the time and what was happening. And what was interesting, I think, about this book too is that reading it, it could have took place in the 90s. It could have took place now. Nothing about it necessarily feels, of a specific era. Again, when you're dealing with a very limited storytelling approach. Also, when you're dealing with Russia, with, let's just say, it's not like their styles have greatly changed in 20 years. But the beginning of it is just that. We see this man wake up. He's in the cover at night. People come in and they just take him away. And I think that's partially of what starts off so scary about it is that almost how he sees this as an inevitability rather than something that's surprising. And when we hear a lot about kidnappings, especially in things like Iraq and Afghanistan, but we don't, I think, as much hear about things going on in Russia for who knows why. But you see him kind of going through, trying to understand what exactly is happening, what can be occurring. Who are these people? What are they trying to achieve? Where exactly is he being kidnapped? Where are they just robbing him? All of this is through his perspective, and this being based upon a true story, it's all about him, the author of the book, sitting down, interviewing Guy, and just hearing his tale, hearing it from his words, and I think that's very poignant in the sense of that shows up in the pages here. You do feel like you are listening to the actual authentic story, not coming through a bunch of different filters before it's on the page. Even though this isn't like necessarily an autobiography per se, it has that personal feel to it because it's coming directly from the source rather than being something happening. And it takes some time, but you hear and you feel the fear that he has to have of knowing what's going on, not knowing where he's going. Is this eventually leading to his death? And it's certainly frightening. And partially it's like, okay, this guy's telling his story, so eventually where it's going to end. There isn't necessarily a spoiler here, but still at the same time, I think where it really begins to shine is in this room, and where he gets stuck in this one location. And I'm a huge fan of like films that take place in one spot, like something like 12 Angry Men, for example. Even though like technically it takes place in like 3 sets, most of it takes place in one location, and you can use that very limited setting to sometimes heighten emotion, to heighten tension, because it becomes very claustrophobic. If you can get you into the mindset of the character, honestly easier to do in film, because you can rely on things like score and atmosphere a lot easier than that of just a comic on the page. And this is necessarily the most detailed art in the world, but it does the story well. And I think it uses a lot of just 6-panel grids throughout, and I think that's important because that does keep the pace moving, but at the same time emphasis just time, and time's a big component of this as well. And in the sense of, it's interesting where the things someone will have to do just to keep an element of sanity, and you see him going through his head just trying to figure out exactly small things, small details like the time of day, how long, what day it is, and just having to try to figure exactly what's occurring. Because you think about it, if you sit in a room by yourself that's just 4 walls, no watch, no clock, you could sit in there for 5 minutes, and then when you come out, you might think it's been 30 minutes. It's hard to tell the passage of time when you have nothing to relate it to, from the sun coming up, the sun coming down, where you're just really relying on small noises outside and just your memory recall. It's hard enough to even remember what time it is when you can just look at our watch and think, oh, it's 10:20, or say, Alexa, what time it is now. But also how much that is pointed to insanity in a way. Like, if he doesn't have that, it is the one thing that can't be taken away from him. They took away everything else, his clothes, his money, his safety, but time is one thing he can kind of try to not give up on. It's him. And then just the fear of every little noise, never knowing what's going to happen next, trying to determine, it's odd because he realizes that he's in this apartment complex and people are just kind of living their lives knowing that there's a guy in the next room that's just chained there and just hanging out, and kind of the relationships he tries to strike up and the conversations he tries to have, the things that are going through. Like, I could definitely see this becoming a movie and being just as good. I don't know if eventually it will or not, but you see him in the almost not necessarily befriends, but certainly tries to build certain relationships with these people, or at least try to figure out, use them to understand what exactly is going on, and using those context clues. So it's kind of almost part discovery, detective story, part just, hostage situation. And it just, the way it's able to kind of put you within that place, put you within his mind space is relatively remarkable. So I would, again, it's not necessarily a story that's going to, with its overall narrative, surprise you or have a lot of twists and turns. Honestly, the ending of it is almost super anticlimactic, but it's being based upon a true story. It's it's not like they can just like, oh, there was this Mel Gibson adventure where they came in and like Black Hawk Down or Zero Dark 30 with soldiers to come through. No, they kind of it's not nearly as action packed as that. It's much more matter of fact, but it's still effective in just showing you what happened. So I would highly advise picking this up. It's a relatively quick read too. It's quite of a thick book, but like I said, it does read relatively quickly because you're going bit by bit, and the pacing of it is quite fast. You could probably finish this in relatively one setting or two. So if you're hesitant because there's a lot of comics out to read, this is a good one to get into. So I highly advise picking this up. And like most of these books, you can get it at your local library. This was, I think, nominated for an Eisner last year as well. It didn't win, but certainly I think was deserving of that honors. So I'll add my honors to it as well. Probably not nearly as prestigious, but hey, what are you going to do? But if you want to find out more of my stuff, go to Geekcast Radio. Check out other videos. I've done a lot of must-read comic videos, from Saga of Swamp Thing to Batman, Halloween to Muhammad Ali. Try to vary it, get different types of books out there, just so some good comics that maybe fall through the cracks and are not necessarily talked about as much as Avengers or Venom or things of that nature. Some of those great books that are outside the realm of superheroes and Marvel and DC. But that's it for me for this week. Just remember, comics are for everyone. The key is finding the right one. Until next time, thanks for watching.